Well, I want to mention that I'm starting a series, I hope, of something that I think is important to many Shaklee people out there, and it's called Tips from the Top. Conversations with master coordinators. My name is Joanne Nistico. I live in Warrenton, Virginia, and I'm a Shaklee master coordinator. I have Lauren B., who's going to be recording this for us, who's new to Shaklee and is interested in finding out more. So I thought I'd gotten an email from the guest speaker today that I'm going to have a conversation with, Faye Burke. I've known Faye for many years, not intimately as a good friend, but knowing her sort of at a distance. And I've always admired her and her husband, Gary. So Faye Burke is a Shaklee Presidential Master Coordinator. And what happened was I received an email asking me if I wanted to stay on her email distribution list because I was always getting her husband, Gary's email. And sadly, we lost Gary not too long ago. And Faye was just checking to see if she didn't want to impose on any of us to see whether or not we wanted to hear from her. And of course, we wanted to hear from her. You know, she was an integral part of all the wonderful things that they've created in their Shaklee business. Not to get you emotional, Faye, or to hit that heart button, but it's so you know how everybody cares. Everybody cared. And so you reaching out to everybody and to all of us meant a lot to me. And it means a lot to the other people in the Shaklee field because you have such insight and great wisdom in your own style and your own way. So she sent the first email out and I said, wow, this is fabulous. What great information. This is what we need to hear. So I asked her if she would share in a Zoom conversation with me about just some of the ideas and thoughts that she has these days. And I'm going to sort of turn it over to her. So Faye, you know, as you go forward with this new stage in your life, and as you see your Shaklee business, I know that you have so many wonderful ideas. And you mentioned that you kind of want to talk about, have a message for out in the field of how you can get your business off the ground and what you might need to do.
Joanne, I always think that in Shaklee, we tend to make heroes of people who have maybe done what we'd like to do or who are way beyond where we are. And what happens in the making of the heroes is that without really recognizing it, we're thinking that they can do it, but probably I can't. And so it's good to have the picture of what's possible in front of us. But what people really need more than anything is to figure out, how do I get started? Because everybody who has gotten to Master Coordinator started at the same place with nobody. And some people start and actually have some capability. You know, they actually are good at some things. You know, they're people and they've got a whole range of people in their life that they can talk to about Shaklee, and everybody jumps on and says, oh, great, I want in. But that's not the way it is for most people. Most people kind of have to slog through those first few people, and a lot of people just aren't able to do it. And so they don't really survive very long in the business. And so I think it's a lot more helpful for people to know, where did someone come from and how did they get their business off the ground, than to hear about where somebody is today. And so I guess there's two things that I think are sort of relevant. Is one, how do you do that? How do you sort of fight through those, those early stages to get something that says, yes, I did get to the place where you think, yeah, I can do this. And then the other thing that I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about is building an organization. And how do you build an organization, and what goes into that, and what kind of thinking, and what are your targets so that you can get to that? And so, I just want to start out by saying, I think in Shaklee today, there are so many things. There are incentive programs, there's the compensation program, there's the products, and there's, it just goes on and on and on. But at the end of the day, how many things are there that you need to do to build a business? What's the one thing you have to do and you don't have to do anything else? And that's, you've got to talk to people. If you don't talk to people, nothing else that you learn is going to make a difference. If you go to every meeting, whether it's a Zoom meeting or in-person meeting or a company meeting, whatever it is, and you don't bring somebody with you, you're not building a business. You're learning information. You're gaining some, you might be gaining insight, but if that doesn't translate into you making an appointment with somebody and sitting down and talking to them, or talking to them over Zoom and making a presentation, you're not building a business. Now, you might not have a good outcome from that presentation. Not every presentation produces a business result. I think the first 16 people that we sponsored in this first summer we were in Shaklee, we started on May 1st in 1970. They paid $4.50 to sponsor. They got a little packet of material and a quart of basic H. Not one of the 16 ever ordered another thing. Not one of the 16 came to a meeting. Not one of the, and they all saw the opportunity, and they all, registered some, interest, or we were too inexperienced to know they were saying no, but they were nice enough to buy, to enroll as a distributor. But every one of those 16 that we talked to, we learned something in the presentation. We learned, we got better, because to start, a lot of times you're not very good. And Gary used to always talk to people about, talking about doing Shaklee meetings to get started. And he said, people are always worried about talking in front of people. And he said, well, you don't have to worry, because no one's going to come. And so you don't have to, it's really more about that you have to do the presentations. You have to be making appointments. If you don't do those things, then nothing else matters.
It's interesting because I mentioned to you that I've listened to some of Eric Worre's stuff, and you said how you went to high school with his brother. Was that?
No, I went to high school with his father's brother.
Okay.
So his uncle.
His uncle. Well, what he said, which was, because I have an event tomorrow night on presenting, actually, which is interesting. And he was saying, start conversations with people and share your story, give your story, get your story down of why you're even doing these things. And he gives 4 points on how you do that. Because he says, if you don't have conversations with people, your business is dead. That's really, we have to converse with people and just share some information and proceed from there. And how do you think people get over the fear of having a conversation with someone?
Well, I can only, in our situation, number one, you have to have seen something that you want badly enough that you're willing to do something that you really are uncomfortable doing. And so it starts with us and what I'm going to show to you. And if I just show you a small little thing, and I might just talk about a couple products, and you might get interested in those particular products or whatever, but if how Shaklee has something to offer for you that could change the course of your life, you're not going to really be very motivated to do something that's really, really hard. So when Gary went and talked to Jim, so the question is, why did Gary go and talk to the person he talked to? Because he called our sponsor and said, I'd like to hear what you have. And the reason he did that is because Jim was talking to the people in his life that he knew. And he talked to Jim Gleboff about Shaklee, and Jim wasn't interested. He was a high school coach. He'd just gone to state, and he wasn't really interested. but he heard him. So when Gary expressed an interest in wanting something different than what he was doing, he was trying to find out what he was going to do after leaving education. Jim told him about this opportunity. He really didn't understand what it was, but he knew where his friend lived and he had a phone number. And so Gary called up and talked to him. Well, Jim told him about how he could build a business. He could be his own boss. He could change his financial future, could have potentially an unlimited income. And all he had to do was find 2 people a year who would be interested like he was. And he thought that sounded kind of doable. And he came home with a quart of Basic H, and I just gotten out of the bathtub, and he wanted me to try the Basic H, get back in the bathtub and try the Basic H. And I wasn't smart enough to say, well, why don't you do it? But I liked the product. And so he saw that there was something there. And so even though he was incredibly shy, never spoke up in a class, always sat in the back, almost didn't graduate from college because they caught him in his senior year, and he had to take speech in order to graduate from college, and he almost quit the class. But he wanted to business. He wanted what our sponsor showed him was possible in Shaklee. He wanted that. And
because he was dissatisfied with his coaching income.
No, he had already decided he was going to leave education, and so it was actually before I met him. He had an opportunity to go and be a graduate assistant in college, and he realized that for some reason what had been his lifetime goal, he decided he wanted to change. So he'd been working in a couple of different corporate jobs that were in sales, and he just didn't have an interest in them, and he saw no future. And so here was something that he could build himself. He'd be in charge of it, and it captured his imagination. And so he was willing to do things that he would never, ever have seen himself do in his lifetime, because the right opportunity was shown. And so that's, we came into Shaklee seeing a business opportunity. It wasn't just about selling a few products. It was really about building something, not selling something.
That would give you a future which of course is what you have today, an incredible lifestyle and opportunity. So he had to work through and walk through as you did, because you were kind of dragged into it from what I understand.
Well, as he said, he came home to tell us that we were in business, and I helped him understand that he was in business. I was not in business, but we had not actually been married quite a year. And I by nature, I guess I'm a team player. So I did parts of the business that he wasn't interested in, but he's the one that had to really make it. He's the one that had to make it happen. And honestly and truly, he was not good. I mean, it was painful to listen to his early phone calls trying to set up a couple of appointments with people that he knew. And then when he made a prospect list, he had my friends on his prospect list, which was really wasn't so happy about.
Cross them out?
No, there are a few that he talked to. There are a few he talked to, yeah. So
yeah, well, he always had the story that he had a list of 100 and that he didn't get through the top. Is that what?
No, it was probably it's one of those things, some things you hang on to, and somehow that particular prospect list disappeared, which is unfortunate. He probably it was probably 50, 58 or 65 names, and he probably contacted maybe 38. And,
so because people get involved in our business for a variety of reasons: health, environment, and opportunity. So you basically saw the opportunity, is where you.
Well, and when we got in the business, our whole community, it was pretty much the same. We saw the business as a totality. It wasn't bifurcated into kind of a nutrition business or an opportunity business, because the opportunity is really, is the foundation of it is products that work and that are consumable and are dependable. And so when we did presentations on the opportunity, which is all we did, we certainly always presented the products and talked about the products and talked about the products were in harmony with nature. And you could tell sometimes as you're talking with people, they don't seem to be so interested in the opportunity. And so then you kind of adjust, and then the focus would become more on the products. So the products have always been fundamental to the business, but our focus was on building a business with our products. But it wasn't really a separation. And we always felt that in terms of helping people, if we, by focusing on the business and building business leaders, we actually sold more products than oftentimes than people who only focus on the products, because we were multiplying our own efforts with more people. So as a result, our organization probably does in the neighborhood of maybe $6-7 million worth of volume a month. Or no, a year, I'm sorry, a year. Yeah. And we could never do that by ourselves.
Right. And Mary Loomis always used to say, who helps more people, a distributor or a master? It's because we've just reached out to more people. So let's say there's people that are going to be watching this and they say, wow, that sounds really fascinating. Especially today when there's people who need hope. Do you want to be locked down and go back into a 9-to-5, or have your future being dependent upon some other entity that you have no control over? Of course we have great history with Shaklee that anybody can resource on why it's such an outstanding company. And maybe they're viewing this Zoom because they've heard more about it and then want to hear tips from the top. What would you say that, the next steps would be? Or you talked about having the conversations, talking to people. What other guidance do you see that?
Well, I think, the first thing that we need to have is we need to have a presentation, and we need a simple presentation that's compelling, that we can show individuals and sit with them one-on-one, face-to-face, or today, there's not very much face-to-face now. By necessity, it's on
Here
Zoom.
we are.
But that's face-to-face.
Yeah.
And we need to have a simple presentation that shows what we have in Shaklee and what Shaklee can offer them. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we learned early on, was when we would give a presentation, and if the response was something along the lines of, oh, I'm really glad that you found something that you're excited about, that was a clue that we hadn't really done a very good job. We talked too much about us. We talked too much about what we wanted to accomplish and what we were going to do. And we needed to make a change. We needed to make sure that we were talking about the person we were sitting with and what would be possible for them and how their life could be impacted and so forth. And the second thing was meetings. Without presentations and without meetings, we wouldn't have had a business. When we started out going to meetings, because that's where we learned, that's where we saw other people, that's where we were inspired, that's where, you come to the meeting the next week and you might have your tail between your legs and you haven't been able to get anybody to, you've talked to people. And then you come and you see other people who've been having success and you get encouraged and you think, okay, I can do that. And then you go back and you try again the next week. And eventually you start to put you start to put a few people together and you get a little bit of volume. And then when you get some volume and you get somebody that's excited about the products, then that enthusiasm carries you over to your next presentations. So for us, it was presentations and it was meetings. Meetings we went to, and then it became the meetings that we did. For us, the key for anybody developing an organization or developing their own personal business for that matter was to start doing meetings. Well, when? Well, as soon as you decide that you want to build a business, you start hosting your own meetings. And then if nobody comes to your meeting, you give the meeting anyway. Tell people by the time you've done 12 meetings, stand up on your feet or, on a Zoom, you will qualify as a business leader.
It's interesting because right now I'm hosting quite a few Zoom events for our teams to be able to bring people to. And one of the things that you said was when you come to an event, you're gaining information, but when you bring someone, you're building. And I think that is something that is the hardest for people that I'm seeing, is that it's in how do the invitation flow. But what you're saying is keep on inviting, because in the beginning you don't know how to do it, and it gets better and better and easier and easier.
Well, and then actually we sort of found for us that we never ever did get anyone to go with us to our sponsors meeting in their home ever. And then we started to do our meetings. And that was probably 4 months into it. And after 4 months, we'd earned $25.62. So, clearly we didn't have a very big group. And, but we had a meeting in our apartment, 11 people came. It was 2 hours. And at the end of when everybody left, I tried to find a tactful way to say we needed to find a better way to explain PV, because I think maybe we might have spent a half an hour on explaining PV. And we found a better way, never ever talk about it again. We never tried to explain it.
That's a good idea.
It wasn't. And we don't know who those 11 people were, and none of them ever came back to another meeting. But we continued to have meetings, and then we discovered that we could find people who would have a meeting in their home or for their friends. And that's one of the goals in our business, is to meet the people that the people we're talking to know. That's the way we expand our business. And we found that we could do a meeting in somebody else's home or for somebody else, and then they would show up if they were the host. And so they might not show up if we invited them to another meeting, but they'd show up at their own meeting. And that's kind of where we started. That's where we discovered that we were much more effective at doing meetings for the people that we sponsored. And for us, a meeting might be the host and one other person. They weren't big meetings. We weren't looking, we weren't expecting 15 people. If someone had 1 or 2 people at their meeting, we launched organizations with just 1 or 2 people at somebody's first meeting.
That's a great point. You launched organizations just by having 1 or 2 people. That's a big point for how do you develop an organization. People think they have to have big rooms of people, when actually it's that one person and them being able to effectively bring in some of their people who get excited, who bring in some other people who get excited. So I know again, to bring up some of the stuff that I've learned is the fact that I'm the expert for Lauren right now. So she doesn't know much. So she could say, I'm having a women's event and I'm bringing in my guest speaker, and we're going to be doing it on Zoom because I can't come to her home now. She's got young children, young moms. Would you come on Thursday night? We can gather, rather than her saying, I have this lunch and learn. That's what I'm doing. Come with me. So it's connecting with their people is the most important thing that we can do.
Well, and Lauren, the most important thing that you're going to be doing is you're going to be, the first time you listen, you're going to listen and you're going to be learning. Mm-hmm. The second and third time that you attend one of these events that Joanne does, whether it's a lunch and learn or it's a presentation, you're going to watch what she does. Watch how she handles herself. Watch what she's doing, because after you've watched it a couple times, if you want an organization, then you want to go out and you want to start to do what you have watched. That's the way you become a leader. You don't want to just think, oh, well, I mean, I'm going to keep bringing people to Joanne. I'm going to keep bringing people to Joanne and build a business. That's not the fun of building a Shaklee business. The fun building a Shaklee business is that you get better and you become a leader and you start figuring out, how am I going to build an organization? How am I going to move on from where I am? And the way you do that is that you do it yourself. That's the, I think, Joanne, you started out, or maybe earlier in our conversation, you were talking about, we were talking about the fun of Shaklee. And for me, the fun of Shaklee is making it happen and getting better and trying things and
out of your comfort zone.
Right. And then in growing yourself, and then watching the people that you bring into the business when they start to do the same thing that you're doing. And so they come and they watch you do a few presentations, they watch you do these things, and then they start scheduling their own. Mm-hmm. And so pretty soon, if you're doing it right, you could be sitting there in your home doing a Shaklee event one night and thinking, I bet I've got 50 things going on, 50 events just tonight in my organization where they're building their own business. And as a result, your business is going to be expanding. I mean, that is an incredible idea. And I remember going to one of the early meetings. I have no idea who said it. When, and this was, I hadn't been anywhere. I lived in Minnesota, and Arizona was like, really a long ways away. And he said, multi-level is when you start getting maybe $5 or a 3% bonus from someone, a little old lady in Arizona that you've never met. That's multi-level. And it can be. Now, in our case, we've met everybody on our recap, but the point is that that's what multi-level can offer. And so you do well, but just think of all the people that you have that you bring in, and they're doing well as well. And you have a part in that. Pretty exciting.
It is. Yeah. It is. You have to have a heart for helping people. So that would be awesome.
Well, and it's just, people can do more than what you think they can. Sometimes, you see that the attractive one with the attractive background in college, and maybe they're even really good in business and they're in sales or this, and yet they don't necessarily, they might come in and not do well in Shaklee. They have all kinds of hangups that prevent them from doing something in Shaklee, even if they want to. And then somebody comes in that doesn't have near the natural capability, near the experience, and they can do so much more than they would have ever dreamed was possible. And I mean, our business is filled with people like that.
Every business, I think, it's so true. It's some of the least likely people. I was one of them. I mean, I could hardly say my name in front of anybody, let alone start a conversation. So it's a great personal development situation as well. And it is about helping other people, giving, and especially now, I think we're at a pivotal time now to open our mouths and have conversations, because we have excellent choices for people, whether it's improving people's health, immunity, etc. But opportunity, I needed the opportunity. I was looking for something, and I'm with you. When I saw the multiplication process, I thought, how easy is that going to be to find, 15 of me when out there? And it proved a little more difficult, but it was.
Well, we didn't focus on the 15. We focused on the 2 a year.
2 a year.
And
That's good. I should have thought 2 a year.
well, and the 2 a year, interestingly, we never found more than 2 a year, but we found 2 a year for 8 years. So we had a net gain on our first levels of 2 a year for 8 years. And so it took us 8 years to get to master. And we had friends coming in that were getting to master in 3 years at the time. And it just took us longer. You know, I mean, we just had farther to go, and you know, so we trudged along, but it's not a race.
You also said, you know, in your email about keeping it simple. There's so much information out there. So you had simple steps too, like saying to someone who's getting started, 2 a year. You know, look for 2 a year. That isn't that monumental.
Gary I mean, he would have people say to him, because Gary, I mean, I was at home, and you know, after Rachel was born, Gary would go out on the road because most of our business was out of town and actually out of state. And oftentimes there'd be those people that would think, oh, 2 a year, that's just not fast enough for people. They want to have fast growth. And people that want fast growth often have no growth. You know, even if you grow 1 a year, that's growth. And personally, you know, in terms of looking at our organization, I always like to see, I don't understand when people are in Shaklee and going to meetings and doing all the things, but actually not talking to new people and not growing. Because it just seems to me that you always ought to be able to grow. You know, even if you're just going from being a 2000 PV director to 22, you know, and just think if every year you just increased it some, and as opposed to always staying the same, because, you know, growth is where it's fun and you feel good about the business and you feel good about yourself. And, but yes, I think it's real easy because there's a million lists of things, you know, like you were talking about the 7-step process. I mean, I probably on my computer, I've got 12 magic principles, and I've probably got a list of 10 things here and whatever, but most of them are kind of the same. They all involve contacting people, presenting to them, sponsoring them, and encouraging them. Most of the things that really truly build are all about people, and a lot of it is intangible. It's believing in people, believing that they can be successful, applauding their efforts that they, you know, when they make efforts, and having a good feeling about the outcome they can have. A lot of success in Shaklee is intangible. It's not on a list of things to do.
Being consistent, you know, with it too. I would say small, simple steps, tasks, simple steps every day. A little bit of Shaklee every day goes a long way. You know, we have people who stop and start and stop and start, or get discouraged and quit. You know, I could have easily I'm sure you could have, as you were saying in your story, it's easy to get discouraged in the beginning when you just don't know what you're doing and you make a lot of mistakes.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I mean, I was sort of praying that Gary would fail, and then I realized I didn't have to pray because it wasn't looking good. And what I wasn't counting on was that, you know, there was no giving up. He was just pressing on and to figure out what the key was.
Amazing. And he loved it though. I mean, you know, it took a little while probably, but you know, you could see that it is more joyful when you're having good results.
Well, I think there's just so much that you can learn along the way. And I think that was maybe that, you know, we all come with different gifts. And maybe that was the thing that was the gift for us, is that if things weren't going well, you tried to figure out what could you do differently. Not I'm failing, it's not working, but what do I need to do that's different? How can I get better? How can I do better? I think too often people just feel like they feel like they're failing, they feel like they're not good enough or whatever, rather than what is it that I could do to get better. So what was it that got you over the hump, Joanne?
Asking that question, that was an excellent, what do I need to learn that I'm not doing right? Because I need to, so I would look at what Mary Loomis was doing and say, well, what is she doing that I'm not doing? How can I improve who I am? I would listen to Gary Burke. I would listen to Jim Burke. I would listen and realize what I needed to improve in my own personal skill level. And so that was really basically, I became a student and I listened to my mentors that did it and were successful at it. And
your mentors, were they people that you were in contact with, or were they mentors that you adopted from not have even known who you were?
a lot of times they didn't know who I was. I was
Mhm.
just a face in the crowd, or, we had audio tapes at that time.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
Jim Rohn, there's so many personal development people, which I loved, getting over my shyness, getting over the fear of talking to people, getting over, any list of litanies of things I had to
Thanks.
overcome.
When we went to our first convention, and like I said, I mean, Gary was very shy, and he wouldn't introduce himself to anyone. But we were staying in a hotel in San Francisco, which was a big deal to go. The company, if you were a business leader at the time, they had a convention that everybody would be invited to come to. And Gary would leave me in the hotel room. I would not be ready. He would just leave. It was, and I'd have to trail along because he wanted to get down in the lobby, and all he was interested in was seeing who had a key or a master coordinator pin on, and then he would just position himself and sort of lurk around where they were and just listen to their conversations. What were they talking about? He wouldn't go up to them. He wouldn't shake their hand. He wouldn't introduce himself. He just would stand where they were conversing so he could overhear their conversations. And
Yeah.
what did they talk about? What could he learn from their conversations? And
one of the challenges today are there are too many experts out there that quote unquote want to give you their advice. So for anyone who might be listening to this, you choose a few mentors that have done it and done it appropriately so that they have a solid, stable organization like yours, and listen to them and know that the magic bullet basically is us learning and being mentored by them.
Well, as you can imagine, I have piles of papers that I can go through. I mean, I've got things on my own computer, and I've got, 100+ various kinds of presentations minimum on Gary's computer, and I have stacks. I mean, I've probably got 2 feet of yellow legal size papers with notes and so forth.
Wow.
And to be perfectly honest, they all tell the same story. Some different words, some different, a different order perhaps, but there's really not, I mean, things haven't changed.
Fundamentals. But what was Gary's word? Fundamentals wasn't one of his big words.
Well, he was a football coach, and in football, there are different formations, there are different things, but when it comes down to it, the fundamentals don't change. It's how quick your feet are and your feet position and all of that. And in Shaklee, there can be programs, incentives. We can have Zoom calls now. You can contact people through Facebook and all those other things. But at its core, what is the story you're telling?
Amen.
And, so there's the story to tell of what Shaklee is and what we have to offer. And then there's a story about how we grow, and we grow in an exponential fashion. we're looking to reproduce ourselves. We're looking to multiply ourselves and then help the people that we bring in, help them multiply themselves. And so right today, for example, if I were just to go out and create, just pick a number. Let's say I'm going to create 6 first level directors. Well, that's okay. But if you want to build an organization, would I actually be better off creating 2 coordinators? If I have 2 coordinators, I have 2 first levels, and they've got 2 first levels. Now I still have 6. I have the same 6, but I've learned how to build a small organization. And if I can learn how to build 2 coordinators, 2 directors first who become coordinators, and then I can build as many of those coordinators as I want to. And then I can help and encourage them become senior coordinators and then executive coordinators, and then I can become an
A
executive.
duplication. I know I have my best friend since 9th grade became one of my first. And so that was fun and easy because she was a dancer and wanted what Shaklee had to offer. And I think us telling our story about why we chose Shaklee or why we explored getting in, and then finding those 2 that you really like. Some people think they have to talk to everybody, but talk to the people you really like. It makes it a lot more fun and a lot easier.
And you talk to the people, sometimes I see people when they come into Shaklee, let's say they're going to talk to all their neighbors, sponsor all their neighbors. Well, if they have a neighborhood that's really friendly and they sponsor all their neighbors, then who are your neighbors going to, who would be the first people they might talk to? The same might be true of your friend group at church or whatever. So when we sponsored Mary Lou at church, we never talked to anybody else about Shaklee at church. Why would we? Because Mary Lou talked to them and she sponsored them. And when Gary went to talk to his family, besides his mom, well, who's the first one? Well, he's going to talk to his sister because his sister was everybody's favorite. There are 3 boys. So the sister was the favorite of the 3 boys. And so, who is the person that everybody likes? That when they host a gathering or in the neighborhood or in your friend group, that everybody's going to come. They're the one that starts things. Well, that's probably that'd be the one that you'd want to talk to first, and then let them, if they're interested, kind of talk to the rest of the people in your friend group.
Yeah, I always say I would not be a master coordinator if I relied on any of my family. I mean, no, my mother and father purchased Shaklee. I completely insulted all my Italian relatives by telling them they have to get off of white flour and white spaghetti. So, those are the learning curves that you have to go through, what you don't say as well as what you do say.
Right.
So that's where I needed a mentor to guide me a little bit. Well, Faye, we really try to keep these calls short so that people can get the gist and the golden nuggets of what we've offered them today. I think we've got some really gems here for people to take a look at. And unless you want to add some other items right now to kind of in the closing of, talking to someone who may be looking. And Lauren Lauren came to me through looking for an assistant to help me organize myself because I have so much going on. And she's been magnificent with that. And she's been a good student. She was just saying how she's always interested in health and all of that. And she's good at business. So she has good talent and skills that could fit nicely for this business. But what would you say to anyone else that's out there maybe listening to this at the end of this conversation?
Well, I would say to Lauren especially, how old are you, Lauren? You look like you're 2.
I just turned 30 in February, so.
Turned 30. I was 26 and a half when we were sponsored into Shaklee. And so it's been 50 years. And, we've gone through lots of ups and downs of different things in our economy through all that time. And right now we're in probably the most challenged economy that I've seen in my lifetime, and maybe in everybody's lifetime. And yet Shaklee has withstood the highs and the lows. And it is just remarkable now. I just was asked by someone ordered some products the other day, and she sent me an email and said, was wondering how our business is going. I think thinking, maybe not so good. And I'm almost not embarrassed, but I almost feel bad in a way, saying it's amazing. Our business is just flying high. It's just, if we could just get all the products that we need, because the demand is so great. It's really a remarkable thing, isn't it, Joanne?
It is. It has so many gifts. It's really a blessing. It's been a blessing in my life. It's been actually the most consistent thing in my life, other than my children, really.
Well, and if your kids are young, Lauren, or any young mom like you are, I would say that our daughter being raised in a household where a business like Shaklee was going on, where we were always, the conversation was always about how can we help people move forward, and about positive ideas and working with people. Honestly, my daughter's 42 now, and what she learned just being in the house and being around a Shaklee business, and the ideas and the philosophies and so forth, far surpass probably her college academic experience, because it's taught her how to deal with people, and how to interact, and how to be encouraging of people, and understand how to work with different people. So there's that's another intangible benefit that doesn't come with a dollar sign attached to it. But I think it was when Rachel was in college, or maybe even when she got out of college, when it really dawned on her that she and her Shaklee friends had really had such a different life experience than many other people her contemporaries that she was around. I'm sure your kids.
Yeah, they definitely has, and we actually had a health and income call last Thursday, and we featured a couple team that the husband spoke, and that was one of his primary pluses for his wife really building a business. And he's a CEO of an international company, and it was his one major happiness factor for him was what his daughters were seeing with what Shaklee has exposed them to. So great closing statement there, Faye. There's many.
That was fun, Joanne.
Yeah, well,
and nice to meet you, Lauren. Hope to see some exciting things from you.
I hope so. We'll see. Got to get over the fear that Joanne was saying she had. That was me. I'm an introvert, so.
A lot of introverts that build.
Well, and this is, not a closing thing, but, sometimes introverts are people that aren't so busy trying to tell other people things. Introverts listen better, I think. And so that's not a negative. I think in a lot of cases, it's actually a positive.
Mm-hmm.
So embrace the introvertness.
I will.
Yeah, I'll share more of that story with you, Lauren, about my fears. I had quite a lot of them. All right. Well, thank you, Faye, so much. This is the first Tips from the Top with one of the best, Faye Burke. Thanks, everybody who might be watching this in the future, and we'll have some more to come. Thanks, Faye.
Thanks, Joanne.
All right. Bye.